I'm Ash, and you're listening to Health Beyond Tomorrow, a podcast aimed at inspiring the future of healthcare. My mission, well, is simple: to prepare the next generation of health professionals and clinicians to think beyond boundaries. I'm excited to introduce the Moment series, a reflective deep dive into the highlights of my podcast interviews, where I dissect these key pivotal moments, unravel their implications, and ponder upon what lies ahead in the future of healthcare beyond tomorrow. While you mostly hear from my guests, today's a bit more personal. You never really get to hear my deeper opinions in the podcast. So I thought I'd launch this series as our behind-the-scenes look into what makes these conversations truly memorable for me. So sit back and let me guide you through. I hope you enjoy. To kickstart the launch of my new series, I thought it would be most fitting to pick a moment from a conversation I had with John Nosta, a mastermind of innovation theory and an orator whose words linger. I first met John at a conference called Intelligent Health in London. He is a world-leading innovation theorist, and he has a way with words that immediately captivate and engage an audience. Everyone is on the edge of their seat. Case in point, this TED Talk on genius being our birthright.
The first one is this. Very simply, the manifestation of thought reveals this. Genius is our birthright, and mediocrity is self-imposed. Yet we live under a cognitive yoke, an intellectual tyranny that restricts the full capacity of human thought. We're locked into a perceptual reality that is largely a myth.
At Intelligent Health, John delved deep into the mysteries of generative AI models like ChatGPT, challenging us to reimagine our place amidst this tech evolution. His talk was titled Humanity at a Tipping Point.
The human race will have every opportunity to improve.
And if they don't?
Ask Noah.
Sci-fi has long hinted at the singularity, a metaphorical precipice where once we leap, there's no turning back.
Can a robot write a symphony? Can a robot turn a canvas into a beautiful masterpiece?
Can you?
When I brought John onto the podcast, I asked him specifically, is humanity prepared to navigate this tipping point?
Let's go back just a couple minutes to talk about the Big Bang. Carl Sagan's reference was about us being part of a broader reality, almost lost in a sea, in this vast expansive sea that actually diminishes the role of humanity. I think that's what Carl Sagan was saying, that we're a dot in the universe. I think that the moment today is the converse of that. We are actually at that big bang of creation, at the very center where our cognitive capabilities combined with AI creates that exponential change, and it's up to us to create some sort of a regulatory pathway. And it's critical, and it's profound, and it truly is the most transformative time in the history of humanity.
Well, I think the problem is that we are haunted by the dread of the unknown. We are being overly cautious because of what is potentially at stake. There's something called the Temporal Paradox, a theoretical concept that suggests that our attempts to change the future could inadvertently create it. It makes me wonder, are we sabotaging our own AI-fueled destiny out of fear?
The man widely seen as the godfather of artificial intelligence has quit his job at Google, warning of the dangers of AI.
We are already beginning to see the negative implications of this fear play out in society. When ChatGPT first came out, academic institutions and universities' immediate response was to ban all students from using it. They were scared because of fears of misuse and plagiarism. They didn't know how to control it, and instead of tackling the problem and working towards a solution, immediately prohibited its use. This is something I'm trying to change.
So when talking about AI in medicine, I think it should start being seen as a helping hand. Similarly to how we Google stuff, similarly to how we ask a senior consultant. It's a natural progression and a natural extension of getting a second opinion. But in this case, it's going to be AI and ChatGPT.
What you just heard was me giving my first ever keynote talk to around 500 medical students, doctors, and professors. I'm advocating for a shift in perspective and trying to move the conversation away from banning AI in medical school education, but actually embracing it. Embracing its innovative ways that can augment our learning and make revision 10 times, 100 times, even 1,000 times more productive. But it's been really difficult removing fear as an obstacle to progression, and for my university and faculty members to start embracing its applications. So it got me wondering, is it just fear that is holding us back?
It's not just fear. It's a duality of fear and wonder. And let's go back to mankind's first technology. So mankind's first technology, at least I would argue it is, and people have different opinions, but I would say that fire is our first, or one of our first technologies. And think about what fire did. Fire allowed us to migrate, to move, to stay up at night, to light our cave or our house. It allowed us to cook food, which is really interesting because it allowed us to eat protein. And protein grew our brains, right? So really fundamentally interesting things, but it also allowed us to burn down our enemy's house or throw fire bombs and use it as a weapon. So those are the old days of fire. And what people would do, they'd sit around and they'd talk about, how can we control this fire? Okay, and I want you to think about this. I want you to use the same sentence that you use today. How can we control AI? How can we manage this not taking over us? And just use that, but substitute fire, because the discussion was very similar in the sense that fire was this all-powering destructive force. The interesting thing is fire is still the leading cause of property damage in the world. So we haven't eliminated the risk, but we put it into a conceptual framework. But the interesting thing here is fire has a duality. It's a duality of wonder and fear. And we see it in every type of invention. If it's not fire, how about the airplane? Think about the early days of the airplane. 1917, some guy with his goggles comes on and lands in your wheat field and says, come on, let's go for a ride. He says, you know what? Bring the kids. No way, right? It's the coolest thing I ever saw, but I'm not getting in it. Same idea of wonder. We see this with the airplane. People are still extraordinarily afraid of flying, but flying today is the safest form of transportation. And now the driverless car is a really great example of that, because that completely flips people out. Now, here's where we are with artificial intelligence. Arguably, artificial intelligence is one of the most profound and transformative aspects of our digital transformation. Almost by definition, the bigger the innovation, the bigger the fear. So here we are, we're sitting at this profound duality, and it's not defined, it's not resolved, it's not mitigated. We are in the throes of that. So I think that's where a lot of people are in clinical medicine, that they're fearful of this from a variety of perspectives. And not only from an emotional perspective of, I'm the cardiologist, I'm the neurologist, I'm the neurosurgeon, I'm the smartest guy around. You think I'm going to listen to that little box or listen to my phone? So from a psychological perspective, but also from a functional perspective, can I trust a patient's life with this? Can I truly look the other way clinically and rely on that information when my gut is telling me something different?
Medicine is full of learned professionals built on generations of evidence-based practices. The medical world is deeply rooted in tradition. As a result, challenging the medical system is inevitably going to get resistance.
And there's a book. I even ended my talk with this quote, but we could just jump right to it because I think it's so powerful. Alvin Toffler, in 1970, feels like a lifetime ago now, wrote a book called Future Shock. And he said the illiterate of this century will not be those who cannot read or write. Remember, we defined illiteracy centuries ago by reading and writing. The illiterate of this century will be those who cannot unlearn and relearn. And that's, I think you're seeing that in medicine. I think that people find comfort in the way they were taught. And that's part of the issue around digital convergence. And it's hard to break those molds.
With the introduction of large language models like ChatGPT, we've seen that we're inevitably going to have to relearn different processes that have been in place in society for generations. So why should medical school education be seen any differently? And I think this should be also extended to the way we train as doctors. This will need to change. And further to that, the way we treat our patients. If a patient comes into my consultation room and says, I was diagnosed by ChatGPT, what does this mean for me? What do I say? Well, John yet again has the answer for this.
When my wife comes home from the pediatrician, my child is sick, let's say hypothetically, and we're not doing a telemedicine visit, we're actually going to go to the doctor, right? The first question I ask is, so what did the doctor say? So what did the doctor say? That's going to change. I think the dynamic is going to be, so what did the computer say? Is going to be the question. In other words, the information, the differential, the disease, the prescription, the optimal clinical path forward will be articulated by technology and the computer. But here, that's not the end of the sentence. There's a comma there, because the second part of that will be, what did the doctor do? So yes, absolutely, the implementation of care will be provided by the human construct. AI will actually evolve and change the very nature of these roles. It'll also evolve the nature of the care team. So I'm going to have a nurse technologically empowered. I'm going to have a primary care physician who can be technologically empowered along one particular disease modality, if you will. So I think that's going to change.
As I bring the first episode of the New Moment series to close, I hope it shed light on why John's words resonated really deeply. This series took much more planning, effort, and creativity, but I love doing it. So I ask one thing before I go, which is if you've enjoyed it, then please leave a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I heard that the more ratings you have, the more visibility your podcast gets. I have a vision for making this podcast the biggest health innovation and entrepreneurship podcast in the world. It would mean everything to me if you could help me on my mission to get there. Together, let's make health beyond tomorrow a beacon for healthcare's future. If you want to check out the full conversation with John, the link is in the description. Till next time, bye for now.